Now, part of today's gospel may remind you of a popular tune from yesteryear. It certainly reminded me of one. It was by Bobby McFerrin. Do you remember it? Don't worry, be happy. Now, I'm not going to try to sing it, but I have to tell you that if you want to hear it after Mass, Rose Maria has downloaded it on her iPhone, so you can actually hear Bobby McFerrin singing this song. I also have to tell you, when I went to put the information together for this homily, it just kept going through my mind like crazy, and had to I had to try to push it out, because things kept going through my head like, ain't got no place to lay your head, somebody came and took your bed, don't worry, be happy. So let's put Bobby McFerrin away for a few minutes and see what Jesus says, okay? Jesus says, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, what you will wear. Now, are both Bobby McFerrin and Jesus being terribly unrealistic, even naive about this? Or on the other hand, why is it so difficult for us to take the long view of things, or to see the big picture of God's promise of everlasting life and happiness? Now, all the biblical excerpts we've been hearing, and the technical word is pericope, and we might as well all learn that from the Greek, we have been hearing lately at Mass, they all stress God's great gift of trust. Trust. Today we hear, why worry? The lilies of the field from the old translation, and we heard the flowers, whatever. The birds of the air, they don't worry. And if God takes care of them, why would not God take care of you and me? We're certainly worth more than any bird, any sparrow, or any flower. Trust. Do we trust? The Isaiah text speaks to this. If a human mother, we have one example right over there in the corner, who is caring for her child, okay, and the child looks up into the mother's eyes and starts to trust the mother. The child learns to trust the mother because the child knows that the mother cares totally for its well-being. The Corinthian correspondence, our second reading, says that stewards should be trustworthy. This trust is about taking care of what has been entrusted to us. There's that word, trust, again. Remember the late Stephen Covey, he of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People? Okay. Remember, he said that everything in human relationships and in organization has to be built on trust and being trustworthy. Where did he get this? Guess what? He got it from sacred scripture. He studied sacred scripture. I remember, as an aside, years ago, I took Dr. Jim Gilbert's place, it's then called State Tech, and I taught a leadership skills course, and one of the textbooks was Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People and a couple other things by Covey. And I used to tell Jim, it took me about 3 years of teaching this book, and I realized I wasn't teaching so much a management book or a leadership book, I was teaching scripture all the time. Because I kept writing scripture quotations in the corners and Genesis, whatever, or that kind of a thing. And he said, I thought that too, but I thought it was crazy when I thought that. But he agreed with me, okay? Now, imagine if schools or teachers, priests or pastors, lawyers or politicians were not worthy of trust. On second thought, you can probably very much imagine that today. In the old days, that would have been a legitimate question to ask, and it would not have been rhetorical. The answer is, yeah, I can imagine that very, very well. Just watch what's on TV anytime and on cable, okay? So when these institutions and people lose their way and are not trustworthy, okay, we can become dispirited and angry, can't we? And we see that on cable news every night and what's going on in the world and in our own country. Because there's a disconnect between the inner and outer life of trust. The terrorism and public violence we see on the news today is absolutely terrifying. You can't worry, huh? There are so many horrific things going on that if you're like me, you can't keep track of them all. They seem to be happening all the time. And when so many horrific things are going on, guess what? We tend to forget about the tenderness of somebody who we can always trust. God. We worry, then we start to worry about worrying. Instead, we should become more spiritual, more trustworthy stewards. We need to look into the tender eyes of God, just like the child looks into the tender eyes of her mother. We should pray our responsorial psalm for this evening, Psalm 62. Trust in Him, we hear. When? At all times. Both Bobby McFerrin's song and Jesus give us a reason for not worrying. The song, here we go. In every life, we have some trouble. When you worry, you make it double. Don't worry, be happy. But Jesus, you see, gives us a better reason for not worrying. We have someone we can trust all the time, no matter what. No matter what's going on around us, no matter what we're doing. We can trust in God's care for each one of us. Something we can do while this is going on in our world. Memorize the tender words from today's reading from Isaiah, that first reading, and recall them when times are tough. In today's gospel, we got to remember, Jesus was addressing people just like us. So we need to heed His words like they did. Now, when I was putting this together too, something funny happened. It happens a lot. I decided I was going to put a quote from the movie Oh God in it. And guess what showed up on TCM last week? Oh God. Remember George Byrne? I DVR'd it and I watched it just to see if that quote was in there or not. And it was. John Denver says it to him. Remember, God appears to John Denver as George Burns, 80-some years old, with his fisherman's cap on and glasses. Okay? And John Denver says something like, God, how can you permit all the starvation going on in the world and all the many forms of injustice? And George Burns, as God, replies, I don't permit it. You do. Okay? You see, you and I, we are called to alleviate the suffering of our sisters and brothers. It's not just God's job. Always, always, we must remember the words of our divine mercy as shown in the shrine. Jesus, I trust in you. Do you?